Hello, everybody. This is Carol Maletta. Welcome to the Parenting 411 podcast, where we share information parents need from sources they can trust. We often think of babies and sometimes even young children as these helpless little creatures that need us to do everything for them until magically, when it's time for school, they just know what to do. Well, maybe we do know better than that, but we don't fully operate as if we do. I read a profound quote on an Australian parenting website, and it reads, "Babies are born ready to learn, and their brains develop through use. Stimulating and caring environments with lots of different activities give children plenty of ways to play, develop, and learn, and lots of chances to practice what they're learning." So we know children's brains develop the most connections in the first 5 years of life, so we want to use that time wisely. I am so pleased that I get to sit down with educator and child health advocate Chris Lake to talk about those early years and how you can help your child hit those meaningful milestones so that they can make critical connections that can set them up to grow and develop as learners and doers in school and beyond. Welcome, Chris Lake.
Thank you so much, Carol, for that lovely introduction. Thank you for letting me onto your platform and sharing this time and space with me. Very happy to be here.
Sure. I've been definitely looking forward to our conversation. So why don't we start off just talking a little bit about your background and how you came to this space of Sherpa on the parents of toddler journey. That is truly what I think you were doing here.
That is hilarious. Yeah, I'll get you to the mountaintop or die trying. But how it all started, I was taking an experimental psych class at Queens College, and at the end of it, the professor offered us all an opportunity to put into practice what we had just done. And this experimental psych class was the coolest class I had in all of college because we actually got to use a lab rat. We actually got to do very ethical experiments. We simply taught it how to use a water fountain, but it was so hands-on and so applied in knowledge for the first time, not just purely theoretical, that when he gave me another opportunity in the real world to use it on kids with autism, I said, sure, I'll volunteer. I might as well build my resume in some sort of way, not really sure what I want to do just yet in the psych field. And I've been working with kids since I was 14 in some manner or another. I connect very easily with children. Children have always connected very easily with me. So when I started working at this location in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, it was a natural fit. Within 3 weeks, they offered me a job. That was 2006. 16 years later, I am still working with kids with autism, primarily toddlers, and loving it. You know, I go to work, I love my job. I look forward to it. And it's a good fit. It's simply a good fit for me.
Yeah, I get it. I can totally believe it after meeting you and having read your book. Real quickly, can you tell us a little bit about Community for a Cause as well?
Absolutely. So Community for a Cause is my nonprofit that I started in 2014 as a result of working with kids with special needs. Every single classroom that I've worked in has had kids with lead poisoning. And this is before Flint was on the national register and in people's mind space. And as a behavior therapist, assistant teacher, I would see this and I'd have questions as to, well, what's happening here? Why is this still going on? I thought, as most did, that this is a problem solved in the 70s. I also noticed that the kids with lead poisoning were actually much more affected by their diagnosis than autism. So to fast track the explanation and to also disclaimer, this is my vantage point from what I have seen. Kids with autism had an easier time learning than kids with lead poisoning, mostly because kids with lead poisoning were going home and getting not infected, but re-exposed, so to speak. So whenever there was a long vacation, they came back to step one, and it was heartbreaking every time. Wow. So I had one student in particular after I got my master's who didn't come to graduation. Class of 8, he was the only one who didn't show up, and he had big tantrums, big meltdowns, and I never heard from the parents or saw his family again. It broke my heart. And I just felt, is there something more I can be doing for these kids? The kids with autism I'm making progress with, but the kids with lead poisoning, what can I do? So fast forward a bit during my summer vacation, I watched a food documentary called Hungry for Change. And in it, A Dr. Mike Adams casually says that when you eat cilantro, it goes into your blood and essentially eats toxic heavy metals and removes them. Right, exactly. That's how I felt. And I paused and said, Sir, you can't say that so casually. Wait a second, my world has been turned on its head. Let me do some research. And I spent the rest of the summer doing extensive research on, well, what else can, if this is true, A, is this true? And I found that there were studies on this. B, if this is true, what else? Is there other food that we can eat or natural supplements, things that just naturally grow from the earth, things that don't come in an orange bottle that can be a remedy? And I found there were some things, but there's very little research done on plants, and we can get to that a little further down in this interview. But it made me want to spread the word that cilantro, as well as chlorella in particular, those two have been found to be effective at helping to remediate lead. So I met a woman a few weeks after I'm doing all my research who was a lactation consultant, and we chatted and we found we had a similar interest. She said, well, let's do something. Let's throw a fashion show and spread some awareness. And we said, yeah, let's do it. So we started meeting with fashion designers and models and musicians, and we threw this hot fashion show at Toshi's Penthouse in the meatpacking district of New York City on a winter solstice. It was such a good time, such a hot show. We made nothing. It was the wrong crowd. It was the party and play crowd who came out for a fun time. It wasn't people who were concerned about kids with special needs. So we learned something in that. And I said, okay, so how do I tweak this? And we threw another fashion show. It was also a disappointment. And then we split apart, but I said, but I still want to do good. So I started thinking about other paths, and I thought about legislation. And I met with legislators and said, hey, let's change the blood testing levels that we have in New York. And they did. It took some time, but they did. I made pamphlets, handed them out to different areas. I spoke with doctors. I reached out to people. I made sure that people were getting the information they need to know about what they could do today to protect themselves and their families from lead exposure. That's common to all of us. And from there, I've also expanded my charity to tackle different issues as well, from homeless relief, storm relief, sexual violence prevention, as well as community building. And we just started an environmental protection branch, which I'll talk about more in 2023, to just cover issues that the community can gather around on causes they care about. And I plan to keep scaling up as time goes on any issues. People come to me and say, hey, I care about this. That's my outlook. That's my plan.
Wow, what a fascinating journey. And so you talked about cilantro and
Yes.
the effect it can have on remediating lead poisoning. What was the other?
Right. It's a funny side. It's chlorella, basically algae, green algae, chlorella, spirulina. Those two, they're both effective actually at absorbing and remediating toxic heavy metals, pesticides, things that don't really belong in your body. They just naturally have a way to attract them, absorb them, and then get rid of them. But again, the issue is there's not nearly enough research on things that cannot be patented, not enough funding on things that cannot be patented. Food, plants, algae can't be patented. So there's not that much interest in the funded medical community and pharmacological community.
So would this process be effectively chelation, or?
You could say by another name. But yes, that's essentially what it's doing. It's chelating the lead from your system. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I had heard a bit about that when my children were younger. Just this notion that people are walking around with, I mean, it might not be lead poisoning from paint or whatever, but it's, just from the environment they're in, it's in your hair, it's in,
Right.
They can do hair samples of your hair and all of that. And it's just, and, we're walking around with it, and like,
We're walking around with it. It's so
where
present.
is it coming from? That's kind of a whole nother show problem.
Ooh, yeah.
How is this getting into our bodies? But yes, I appreciate you sharing that. Really a fascinating journey.
We'll be right back after this. You love your kids. You do your very best for them. But sometimes it feels like it's just not enough. And you're so sure you're the only one who feels this way. The truth is, you're not alone. It is also true that there are some things you're doing quite right. And there's a community who would love to exchange ideas with you. I'm Carol Maletta, creator of the Parenting 411, a portal for parents where I share information parents need through webinars and masterclasses. And not only that, the parents there support each other on this amazing journey in the Parenting 411 community group on Facebook. I can't wait to meet you in the community. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
Now, we're going to dive into your book, but I have got to say that your book, it was 168 pages, but it's like you didn't waste a word. It's because I have twin sons. They're now young adults, successfully graduated college. They're out working and all of that. But early
Good job,
on,
Mom. Good job, Mom.
and Dad. But they but when they were about a year old, one son was diagnosed with some developmental delays. And so that really took me down not a totally different path. It was actually just a path where I probably took a deeper dive into child development and human development than I might otherwise have. And, it benefited not only my son who had the diagnosis, but, my other son as well. And I learned so much about it, but I had to read or attend a workshop, 3 or 4 books plus a workshop maybe to get all of the pieces you put in the book. And, no book can answer every question, but it certainly is enough there for parents to work from, and especially in those early years as they're helping their children to reach milestones, to be curious and go get more resources and really get into this thing, because it is so important to help them reach their milestones. Because as I the way I felt during this process was the finish line was always moving, because it was like, okay, well, maybe we figured out how to do this thing, but you're not done, because now it's time for this other thing.
Right.
And as I talked in the introduction about how much is possible, especially during those first 5 years, in terms of what the brain can take in and do and how it grows. And you want to keep that learning going all the time, and then hopefully that learning and that interest in learning and acquiring new skills continues well beyond toddlerhood, just into life. And so I want you now to tell our listeners about your book, Help Your Toddlers Meet Their Milestones, and how should parents use it.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for the huge compliment. I'm very glad you enjoyed the book, sincerely so. That touches my heart. It really does. I want parents to use this book as a guide, as a reference that they go back to, that they share and discuss with other parents as well, because raising a child, there's no part of raising a child that's a one-off. There's not a single aspect where you say, okay, I did this, I can check the box, I'm done. Anthony Robbins has a joke when it comes to letting a child learn how to walk. He says, how many times do you let a child practice walking before you cut them off, right? There's no amount. You're going to continue until. Now, what my book does is it allows parents to have the guides to know specifically what to say and what to do to help their child meet their milestones. And there's obviously a variety of different milestones, from speech milestones, socializing milestones, eating milestones, etc. And we're often left in the dark. We're often left as parents to figure it out. Hopefully we can ask a pediatrician, are they meeting the certain milestones they should? And a pediatrician can say yes or no. But unless they're a developmental pediatrician, they might not be able to tell you what to do. So I want to tell parents, this is specifically what you can do. This is what's in your control. The power that we have in this world is our response. This is how you can respond to your child doing this. It also gives them strategies in the face of tantrums. It gives them strategies in the face of challenging behavior like picky eating, aggression, self-injurious behavior, because sometimes parents don't know what to do. And by giving these tools that are evidence-based, that are based on scientific behavior therapy, behavior sciences, which is data-driven, It allows parents to have more confidence that when I try this and when I am consistent with this, I will see results. And I made that comment about the one-off because the important thing is with all things in success, consistency. If you're teaching a child how to point so they can communicate to you what they want, it's not that you guide their finger one time and then you're done. It's not that you guide their finger 3 days in a row and you're done. You do it until they will get it. Neurologically speaking, the brain can't separate sequence. If the child is attending and they recognize my finger did this, I touched this, then I received this, enough times the brain says, okay, that's how I get that. That's actually easier than crying. And as they're starting to babble and you can catch them make parts of words and you can have them say parts of words to get things, the child makes a connection. Oh, every time I go ba, they'll give me the bottle. That's actually easier than crying until someone figures it out. And part of the trick for the parent is to be tough, to recognize, to not cave, to not give in, and to recognize. Biggest takeaway that anyone can take from anything I say is that all behavior continues as long as it's effective. So if a child is doing a behavior that you do not like, but it is effective, that behavior will continue until they will not outgrow it. They will perpetuate that behavior for months to years to decades, depending on the child, because it is effective. I remember one time I was working at a clinic in the Bronx and a child was getting diagnosed and he ran out of the diagnosis room. He sprawled out onto the floor and into another room where we had some parents of students who were currently attending. They were decorating for a fall festival. And they saw this child, they never saw this child before, they didn't know who the child was, they did not know the mother. They saw a child sprawl out and 3 of them descended with cell phones out, Coco Melon ready. Right. And I had to pause and say, stop, back off. That does not help him long term. While it might pause the crying, all you're doing is hitting pause. And a lot of parents don't know what to do, so they resort to hitting pause. And unfortunately, while in the moment that seems like a success, long-term wise, it's just delaying the child's ability to engage in better behavior, more independent behavior, more sophisticated behavior. And time is the most valuable commodity. You do not want to lose time with your child's development. It's not a gamble to take. It's not a gamble to say, oh, they'll figure it out. Oh, it's just a phase. It's not a good gamble because if you lose, it's not just you losing. It's you losing, your child's losing, your community's losing because the potential of who that child could be isn't being realized. And that's what drove me to write this book because I've seen so much potential kind of just not be fully reached. And it requires a village. It requires everyone, not just therapists, not just teachers, parents, cousins, grandparents, older siblings. Everyone has to be in on it. And then we do progress as a people, as a nation, yada, yada, yada. But again, the book gives you specifically what to say and what to do across a variety of circumstances so that your child can make that next step. I give a disclaimer to parents though, recognize the only way out is through. Your child will cry and that is okay. It doesn't make you a bad parent. You don't have to care if people look at you judgmentally. It doesn't matter. What other people think of you is none of your business and vice versa. What you think of other people is none of their business. You're allowed to think whatever you want about anyone. It's true for us all. When you're raising your kid and they're making a crying mess in the floor of the supermarket because they want M&Ms and you're going to wait them out until they stop and then you're going to scoop them up and bring them home, that is fine. And whoever's judging you is hitting a pause button. So you can judge them right back if you want to feel that way. Otherwise, recognize your work is your work. And someone who doesn't understand, that's not for you to be too concerned or embarrassed about. Don't prioritize embarrassment over your child's development. That's another thing. The only way out is through. The kid will cry and that's okay. But pay attention to the trends. As you stay consistent, as you do the work, the crying will decrease in time, in intensity, in volume, and you have to be really aware of that. I started a blog on my site, and one of the blog posts is time their tantrum. Time their tantrum. And to give a real life example for my daughter, who's 28 months old, last Friday, she came home from school and did not want to take off her jacket or hat, which is something she can do by herself on her own. This day, for whatever reason, she said, no. She threw a tantrum and I stood back and I said, okay, cool. I took my phone out, I hit stopwatch and I waited because I want to have a point of reference for how long will this kind of tantrum last. And when you outlast your child's tantrum, a couple things happen. One, the child learns that this behavior isn't as effective as it used to be. That's where things start to shift. But you got to stay consistent. Two, you now know, just like I now know, how long they can last. Because if you cave 10 seconds into a tantrum, you'll never know if your kid only had 20 seconds of fighting them. But if you time, okay, you got a minute and a half, I gotta wait a little while. Other thing that will happen is your child will likely tantrum less time the next time or not at all. Since I waited her out, she hasn't tantrum again. Coming home from school, takes off her jacket, takes off her shoes. It's not a big deal. And that's what happens when you're able to outlast a tantrum. That's what happens when you make the behavior ineffective. They start to realize, okay, that's not how to get what I want. What's a better way? What's an effective way to get what I want? When my daughter starts crying at me, I always look at her and say, we don't cry to get what we want. How do you say it nicely? And she'll pause. Please, can I have? Yes, that's better. Mm-hmm. Aim for success. Aim for what you want to see, and discuss with your partner, discuss with your support group. What child do I want now? Don't stretch it out to, oh, when they graduate in college, hopefully they'll be a doctor or a lawyer. How do I want because that's what we do, right? That's what we do. We visualize the child postgraduate. There's a certain point of time that we picture our kid and certain points of time that we don't picture our kid. For example, we generally don't picture our kid older than we are right now. That's not something we visualize. What will my child be like as a grandparent? I don't visualize that on a regular basis. Little point of reference, right? But how do I want my 2-year-old? I want my 2-year-old to have manners. I want my 2-year-old to use full sentences. I want my 2-year-old to clean up more or less when I ask her to. She doesn't have to be perfect. You don't want a slave, right? You don't want a robot, but you do want a child who's teachable. You do want a child who's coachable. You made an excellent point using that Australian quote, babies are born ready to learn and they need practice. And that's so true. They want to learn, they want structure, they want rules. But if you're not setting them, their brain starts saying, okay, all bets are off. I'm going to do whatever until you prove that you'll keep me safe. And I'm going to try everything until you prove that you'll keep me safe. And that's the danger zone.
We'll be right back after this. As the saying goes, mother's work is never done, except when it really is. I'm talking about my new book, Mother's Work, Pearls of Wisdom and Gems from My Journey. I share my transformation from an outmanned, overwhelmed mom of twin boys to a parenting strategist and consultant, and being honored as DC Mother of the Year by American Mothers Incorporated. In Mother's Work, I tell you about the 7 guideposts that kept me anchored as I weathered the peaks and valleys of motherhood. Grab your copy at carolmaletta.com/motherswork. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
Yes, no, but I mean, in everything that you talked about, you touch on that, or you make that point in the book. It's a lot of so many good points that you made there. The importance of community, the importance of consistency. I came from business where, talk about cash is king. When I came home, I was like, consistency is queen. And that's something that I had to say to myself and not be tempted to give in or change the routine that I was trying to teach them because they were resisting, say, for example, or whatever, but just to continue on or, continue with keep in mind what I'm trying to teach them and what it is that I'm trying to help them to overcome. And so, so many good points there. And I have a question for you, though. I'm wondering, as an expert in this area, do you see I want to keep the pandemic aside for a second, but in recent years, have we found that there's a dramatic increase in children struggling to meet their milestones, or is it just we know more about it?
So unfortunately, it's a little bit of both. And as you ask other experts in the field, they will agree that it's not simply awareness. Awareness plays a part, right? Awareness plays a part. 10 years ago, the rate of autism was 1 in 54. Today, the rate of autism is 1 in 44. And a year ago, it was 1 in 54. And 2 years ago, it was 1 in 68. So we're seeing this telescoping effect, and we're seeing more and more. And that's outside of the updating of the DSM-5 statistical manual for diagnoses. So there is something outside of pure diagnosis and awareness, unfortunately. And when you look at how autism is defined, it's a social, communicative, emotional disorder that is caused by some genetic weaknesses and environmental triggers. And the phrase that I hone in on is environmental triggers, because it's, what's a good example? There are certain things that are very much linked to, and I have to be careful and use that word linked to, not cause, but there are certain exposures that are linked to autism. Certain deficiencies also lead to it. And again, I really want to use my words wisely because I don't want to panic anyone. I don't want to cause any undue concern. But it is important to have a healthy diet. It is important to have a healthy home environment. It's important to keep an eye on where your kid goes when they're crawling, how much their hand-mouth activity is happening in what environments, because there are some environmental exposures in a lot of different places. If you have a child and you're doing renovation in your home, you want to make sure that renovation team is EPA certified. They know what they're doing. They're taking all the proper precautions. If they're blowing, if there's sawdust, if there's paint that's being in any way saw through or dust, that they have a wet process, that they have a vacuum process. Because I can't tell you how many students I've had who told me, oh yeah, when I was pregnant or when he was just born, you know, such and such did renovation on the crib windows, like right where the kid's sleeping in. You know, it breaks my heart because I don't want to tell the parent like that's likely part of what's happening here. And there are some parents who I know who have 4 kids and all 4 of them have autism, so that's more of a genetic issue, potentially. But the important thing for parents is to focus on paying attention to the signs, paying attention to red flags, paying attention to where should my child be at this age? Are they 12 months old and they're not walking? Are they 15 months old and they're not talking? Is your pediatrician concerned in any way? Because it's, again, time is the most valuable commodity on the planet. You can't buy time. Elon Musk cannot buy time. You can get everything else back, but you can't get time. So if you're concerned, speak up, speak up. Some pediatricians are a little taciturn to bring it up on their own. So if you're like, hey, I noticed my kid barely looks me in the eyes. Is that normal for this age? Hey, I noticed my kid doesn't really smile. Hey, I noticed my kid doesn't really want to play with any toys. They just want to play with strange things, or play in a very repetitive manner, or they're very aggressive, or when they tantrum, it seems abnormally intense. Bring this up with your pediatrician. It might be that you have no point of reference for a tantrum, so it's perfectly normal, or it might be that your child shouldn't be tantruming for an hour plus over something as innocuous as the computer screen is buffering. So speak your concerns, talk to your community, talk to your pediatrician. If you want to get a referral, a pediatrician is not going to get in your way. That's not an inconvenience. Tell them, hey, I'd like to have a referral to a developmental pediatrician for an evaluation. They'll help you out. They'll hook you up. It's not an issue. But you know, to answer your question, yeah, it's increasing. Unfortunately, to be real with you, if you were to Google search, is the rate of X, Y, or Z increasing, and you put in virtually any disease besides HIV and COVID, the answer is yes. We have a dirty environment, and we have not made any national or international proper effort to clean it up. My friend, for example, my friend lives in Brooklyn Heights on the 11th floor. And he has a 3-year-old daughter, and he says the windows, when he opens the windows and he takes a wet paper towel and he just wipes the part of the window that's facing the street, it's always black. He's on the 11th floor.
Wow.
That's coming in. You open the windows on a hot day, that's the stuff that we're not seeing is coming in. We're always exposed to some environmental nastiness. It's on us to keep our bodies clean, exercise, be aware of what we can do to fight against what we are exposed to, and try to avoid overexposure as well. PM 2.5 is an exhaust. That's actually sometimes linked to autism, and that's just from cars, trucks, automobiles. There's studies that show the closer a child lives towards the highway, the more likely the higher the rate of autism, I'll say. And we haven't cleaned the air, right? When's the last time we heard about any government program to clean the air? Never, right? Never.
Right. There's just plenty of it.
Plenty of it.
That's the way we operate, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's shift a bit and, you know, talk about behavior, because that's something that parents are dealing with, especially with young children. And so, you know, of course, you know, in Adlerian psychology, we know that all behavior has a purpose. So talk about the 5 functions of behavior, the way you described in the book, meets.
Absolutely. So MEETS is an acronym very popular in the ABA world, and it's accurate to a T for all human behavior. And you can even apply this to animal behavior as well, to be honest. But MEATS. So M stands for medical, and I'll get into each in just a second. E is for escape. A is for attention. T is for tangible, as in stuff. If a child, I want this, I want this, I want that stuff, that's tangible. Access, and S is for sensory. For example, if you've ever put your jacket on, if you ever had a long sleeve shirt on, you put your jacket on and the sleeve bunched up around your elbow, that is a sensory issue in that moment that you want to alleviate right away. And so our behavior is dictated by these 5 things or a combination. And to give examples, so medical, if I have a migraine, but I'm exceptionally shy, I don't like talking to strangers, I want talking to people, I'll use as few words as possible, I speak very low. And my first day at work in a new place, and the migraine hits like in the last 30 minutes of work, and I'm leaving to go to the bus station, but this migraine is blinding, I need medication. I'm going to step outside of my normal behavior routine and ask a stranger, is there a CVS, excuse me, miss, is there a CVS nearby or Walgreens? Something I would never do, but because I have a medical issue, my behavior has changed, okay? Escape is seen in toddler tantrums every single day, every single day. It's also seen in adult behavior as well. And it's funny when you start to realize when friends, partners, etc., are engaging in escape behavior, and you'll start to get annoyed by it once you are able to identify it. But for example, if you're asking a child, it's time to go, and all of a sudden your legs have stopped working. There's no more nerves in their legs, and they are now a pile on the floor. This is an example of escape behavior. If you tell a child that it is time to, let's say, we're going to do this activity, and they just flail on the ground and pound their hands, that's escape behavior. Anything that one does to try to get out of doing something they don't want to do is escape behavior.
Whoa, Chris was really on a roll as he was explaining to us the motivations behind children's behavior. Of course, he used the very useful acronym MEETS. So we've already walked through the medical need that could be driving behavior. We've also talked about escaping, as in your child trying to escape doing something that they really don't like or that they just really don't want to do. So we're going to stop it here today, let you contemplate what you've heard already, and I want you to come back for part 2 of surviving and savoring the toddler years. In the meantime, like, subscribe, and share this episode, and just be ready to be enlightened further. Chris has so much valuable information. In the meantime, don't be hard on yourselves. Remember that it is never too late to be the parent you want to be.